All right, guys. So welcome to our second session for POB. Right. Last week we looked at business terms. Today we're going to continue with our session 2. Just slides up. Right. So what we're going to do today is we want to start to introduce business structures, right? We want to start to talk about the environments that businesses operate in, right? Apart from that, we want to start to talk about right, the environments that businesses operate in, public sector, private sector, right? We want to talk about different forms of business organizations. So that's what we're going to focus on. Or that's the highlight of this session. This session is going to be touching on those things. Public sector and private sector, those are the environments that we have that form our business environment. Forms of business organization. So today we may touch on sole traders or sole proprietors, partnerships, limited liability companies. Before we get into that, last week I gave you guys some business terms to learn. So I would come back and ask you guys about that before the end of the session. Division of labor. Anybody can remember who was the guy that came up with that theory for division of labor? Specialization. Remember that little exercise we did? Building a house, designing a car, putting together a movie. We break it up into these individual tasks. You remember that? Anybody? Division of labor. Adam Smith, does that ring a name? Does that ring a bell? Remember that? Kira, Malachi?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Adam Smith. Right? Reasons for establishing a business. Why would you want to establish a business? Why do people open businesses? I mean, you can remember? No? You'll forget already. So principles of businesses are very hands-on type of thing, right? It's very straightforward in the sense that we see it every day. Why do people decide to leave their jobs, right? Or probably not even bother to seek employment. They just decide that they want to open their own business. So it was one of the main reasons. Anybody can tell me? Do people open businesses to run at a loss? No?
To like make their own money and work their own hours.
Right, very good. Right. They want their own, they want to be able to earn their own money, right? So the main purpose of running a business is to make a profit. And they want to have better control over their time. If you own your own business, you can determine the hours in which it is you would like to operate business. You could also determine the nature or the way in which it is you want the work to be organized. All right. Apart from that, too, people sometimes open a business or establish a business to follow some sort of passion that they have. Right? A lot of people are very passionate about certain skills and talents that they have. And for that reason, they decide to open a business using that skill or passion. Right? You find people that go into interior decorating, artists, musicians, right? Some people just born with a natural gift to sing. And then that ends up a business for them, Other people that just have a knack for interior decorating, for sewing, for even a barber for cutting hair, right? They're just good at it. So people follow passions, right? And that's one reason for establishing a business. Remember the video we looked at by those two students? People want more control over their time, more autonomy over their time. Businesses, so when you open your own business too, you could also determine your income potential. With a job, you have a salary, you have a contracted salary that you're going to work for. You have hours of work to operate within. When you own your own business, it means that you can now determine how much you want to earn, because the success of your business is all based on how hard or how much you push your business, right? It's not necessarily the same case when you're employed, right? Contributions of a business. Well, one of the main things is that businesses tend to contribute significantly by providing jobs. They contribute to the economy. The number one contribution is provision of jobs, right? Businesses, because they're in operation, employ a lot of people. And that's based on that same theory we talked about earlier with divisions of labor. Division of labor, you're going to break up a task into a number of different routines, right? Or different components, and that provides jobs for people, right? So that's the number one thing. So what you want to do, or my suggestion is that, you know, every week or at some point in time, you just want to kind of recap what you looked at the previous week before. And each week you do that again. So I was telling a student recently when I was doing business studies, and this is as an adult while working with kids and things like that, is that I would make it my business. I would split up the subjects I was doing. Well, there's a lot less than you guys, but the volume is a lot more. And I would always start from the last thing that we did. So the most recent session, and I always read back to the first session, and I'll rework the questions, everything, and I'll keep doing that over and over every week, over and over and over and over and over. So that the more that I see these things, the more that, you know, it sticks, it stays in that subconscious memory. So it's easier for you to retain, especially with business. You know, if the more you hear these things over and over, the more you read it, the more you see it, the more you look for examples, it's easier now for you to express yourself freely in an exam, right? You could talk a lot about the different topics because you understand it. When you understand it, you don't need to commit it to memory. All right. So don't forget cameras on. We're going to move into the actual lesson now. Public sector. So the public sector is that part of the economy that is financed by the government, right? And this is through taxpayers' dollars. It is controlled and operated by the government. So the public sector, we're talking about that sector where we have our police service, our healthcare system, we're talking about schools, we're talking about any government ministries, even some corporations as well. They are owned by the government. For example, TNTech, WASA, right? These are government entities. And the main purpose of these entities in the public sector is to provide a service at the lowest possible price. PTSC, Public Transport Service Corporation, that's for buses, right? Anytime they operate where they operate to make a profit, so that's like TNTech and WASA, right? The profits are usually used to improve the efficiency of the firm, right? It's not to fill pockets like what you would see in the private sector. And this is the benefit to all citizens. So you will find in the public sector, the type of corporations or businesses that you'll find in the public sector are usually in line with those to provide needs, basic needs. So Works and Transport Division, they're responsible for the roads. TNTech is responsible for electricity. WASA is responsible for providing water and even removal of sewage, right? You have places like Swimcall. You have, although I think Swimcall might be kind of privately, I'm not certain about that one. You also have places like your Ministry of Health. All of those health centers that are set up in different areas, they are there to provide healthcare services. When we go to the public beaches, we have lifeguards there. That's another public sector entity. They actually operate under the Ministry of National Security. They're grouped together with the fire services. That's another one in public sector. Police, army, prison services, Coast Guard, all of these are public sectors, right? We also have areas such as like Ministry of Labor. right? Ministry of Labor. You have the Ministry of Education. They're responsible for all of the schools, the running of the schools, the administration of the schools, right? There's the entire Public Service Commission, where anybody that is employed with the government is employed through the Public Service Commission, immigration officers, right? Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. All of these are big public sectors or big parts of the public sector that is important. When we think about the regional corporations, they're responsible for, maintaining the drains and the waterways, removal of garbage, removal of, when people cut down a tree or you clean up your house and you throw out an old bed outside, who move those things? That's not a private company moving those things. And even if it's a private contractor, they're contracted through the Ministry of Works and Transport, right? Sour Lavington Regional Corporation, right? Your EMA, right? EMA, Environmental Management Authority. Disaster Preparedness Unit, they're the ones that respond when we have things like a hurricane or earthquake, right? All of these are public sectors. And public sector workers and organizations is funded by the government. And where the money comes, well, it comes from taxation. When we work, or even when we purchase items, we pay taxes, right? Your parents pay taxes when they work. We call that pay as you earn, PAYE. When we purchase items in the stores, when we order items and ship them in through, whichever web source, Aeropost, Tropical Express, we pay duties on these items coming in. All of these are taxes where the government earns additional income, right? Or earns money. And that money is what is used to run or provide capital for the public sector. Now, the public sector is really driven by the need to provide goods and services to the population. And this is with the intention to improve their quality of life. Better transportation services, better roadways, reliable electricity. Do you know in some countries like in Africa, right, they have serious problems with their electrical supply or electricity supply. And what they've said is that as their population continues to grow, if they do find alternative form of, because currently they use hydroelectric power, right, from those massive rivers and waterfalls that they have in Africa. If they don't find alternative sources, they're going to find themselves in problems where they're going to have a shortage of energy in terms of electricity, especially as the population increases and there's greater demand as they shift towards doing more manufacturing and exporting on their own, right? So the public sector is very important for improving the quality of life, right? And helping to raise the standard of living in a country. And as you go on with your business studies, we learn more about quality of life and standard of living, right? So the public sector is that portion of the economy. When we talk about the economy, we're talking about all of the businesses that is operating within the country that drives trade and business and money in the country. So the public sector comprises of all levels of government and all government control enterprises. It does not include any private companies, voluntary organizations, and households. So here we are talking about WASA, TNTech, Northwest Regional Health Authority, Ministry of Education, even NALIS. You could go to the library. I remember going to the library with my son when he was younger, and they have all kinds of services. You could rent books. You could even rent DVDs, right? They had clubs that you could join, right? The librarians would put together
computers.
They have computers, they have access to computers and stuff at certain times. Some of the libraries even provide like assistance with homework and research, right? Then we also have public corporations in the energy sector, right? Previously we had Petrotrin, although they closed down Petrotrin a couple of years ago. We have the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, NGC. All of these are government-run organizations. The private sector is the other sector now that works alongside the public sector. The private sector is that part of the economy that's made up or funded by your private individuals. They're owned and controlled by private firms. So here we're talking about Answer Macal, Massey. We're talking about Extra Foods. We're talking about Prestige Holdings. And you have to get familiar with some of these these businesses or organizations in the country and read about them in newspapers and things like that. Prestige Holdings, they're into the hospitality area. They provide food services through TGI, Subway, Starbucks, KFC, Pizza Hut, right? To mention a few. You have Carib Brewery, right? As another big private sector organization in our country. These organizations I'm talking about, if you follow them when they do their annual reports and stuff and they publish it in the newspapers, they bring in millions of dollars of revenue. And remember, when businesses make a profit, they have to pay taxes to the government. So they contribute to the economy, or they actually provide the government with money through taxes. And those same taxes are used to pay our parents, if our parents is in the teaching service or in the healthcare service, right? Or any protective services, right? This is where the government generates tax revenue from these large companies when they're operating in this huge amount of profits, right? Massey, they enter groceries, Extra Foods, right? Bhagwan Singh Hardware, even Caribbean Cinemas 8, Movie Town, right? They are hospitality industries as well. They provide services. Again, they generate a lot of money. Even foreign enterprises as well, such as PriceSmart. PriceSmart is not a locally owned private institution, right? Somebody probably has a franchise for it here in Trinidad, and the parent company is more than likely in the States. So they repatriate most of their profits back to America. But they would still pay taxes locally. So private firms, they are owned by private individuals and owned and controlled by those private firms. And their objective is mainly to make a profit, right? Their main objective is to make a profit. They're not into the provision of services. They're trying to make a profit. They want to know that I put out X amount of capital to build this place, a next set of money to bring in all the goods and stuff that I'm going to be supplying, right? I'm going to be selling. I want to sell this at a markup so that I could earn a profit now for myself, or to be able to expand the business, right? So private sector includes self-employed persons, because we have small privately owned businesses by, you'll see later, or sole traders. And they make up something called the cottage industries. These are small business owners that are operating with small capital, usually operating from home, low number of staff, not a lot of staff, not a lot of technology being used, but yet still, they are the larger portion of businesses in our economy. There's a lot of small business owners, right? It also includes manufacturing industries, as I mentioned, the Carib, the Ansa Macal, right? The local manufacturing firms like Bear Fruit Juices, right? Bertie's Pepper Sauce, you talked about that last week, right? They're all into the manufacturing industries. Firms in construction industry, so the hardwares, Bhagwan Singh, Dan Steel, right? Joint ventures, right? This could be firms that not really joint ventures, franchises is the correct word. So that's like the Prestige Holdings with Pizza Hut and what's the other one? The Caesar's Pizza, right? Your Popeyes, your McDonald's, your Burger King, all of those, right? Those are multinational firms that operate through franchises, and even cooperatives as well. They're the ones that form the private sector, right? So the firms in the private sector, they have these features. Their aim and number one priority is to make a profit. If they're not making a profit, then they'll close down, right? Can't remember if it was this year or last year. I don't know if you remember, Kira, where there's this company that opened somewhere in South, and it was a skating rink, like an ice skating rink. You heard about that? Right. And they probably didn't last a month, right? Because at the end of the day, the main aim of a business is to make a profit. If they're not making a profit, then they cannot continue to exist. After a while, the expenses is going to become more than the revenue, and they're not going to be able to meet the expenses. And unfortunately, the sad fate of a business like that is they'll have to file for bankruptcy and close down. Now, in the private sector, usually the profit is either earned by the business owner, if it's the case of a sole trader, or it's shared among shareholders. And you see different types of or forms of business organizations, and we'll understand what I mean when I say shared amongst the shareholders. The business itself is funded by the owners in the private sector, and this can be done through different means depending on the form of the business organization. Sole traders usually save up their money. They may have been working a job and trying to do this small business on the side, and after a while they save up enough capital to probably go out on their own. So they fund their own business, right? Other types of businesses might look for funding from venture capitalists, which are companies that are set up to provide capital for businesses to start. And they might either give them a couple of years in order to return that money that was lent to them, or they might take up part ownership of that business, right? In the private sector, there's very little to almost no government intervention into their private affairs, but they are regulated by the governments, right? According to your business act. The businesses, as I mentioned, is funded by private individuals. So unlike the public sector, which is funded by taxpayers' dollars, the private sector, the money comes from the owners themselves, right? And for that reason, owners are free to make their own decisions, so long as they're not contrary to the law of the land, right? They can't do illegal things. So far, we talk about public sector and private sector. I mentioned a number of private companies that operate inside of the private sector. For example, Carib, right? And I talk about some other food franchises, right? So I have some questions just for you to make some jottings in your book, and then we'll recap. I want you to give me some examples of private companies. We talked about the public sector being, TNTech, WASA, PTSC, Public Transport Service Corporation, right? What is the main aim of the public sector? And 3, what is the main difference between your public sector and your private sector? The main difference that separates them. Somebody is more interested in earning something than the other. That's my hint. All right, so this is our brief recap before we get into our forms of business organization. So I'm going to give you guys, I don't know, 5 minutes to think about it and see what you could come up with, and then we will correct. Yeah? All right, nice. Right, so we wanted to give some examples of private companies locally. What examples did you guys come up with? Now, when we say private, you can just think about in your area and whatever businesses that is running on your area, on your main road, right? Remember, these are not owned by the government. Once they're not owned by the government, then they have a private company. So your groceries, your hardware, your pharmacy, right? Your variety store, all of those are examples of private companies. What examples you guys came up with?
I live next to a pharmacy, so I had put like the name of the pharmacy, which is like CG's
Right.
pharmacy, I think.
Very good. What else?
Also, yeah. Massey stores.
Massey stores, right?
Minibar, Presto.
Good, good. Malachi, what about you? What you came up with?
Starbucks, Rituals, Focus,
right?
CVS, Cash and Carry.
Right, that's a variety store. Good. So those are good examples. Those are all examples of private companies. And just to make sure that you could distinguish, give me an example of a public sector company or organization. Let's see if you remember any.
TNTech.
TNTech. Very good, very good. And what's the main aim of the public sector? What are they? Why are they in operation? What do they want to do?
To provide a service to the public.
Right. At the provide a service at the lowest cost, because what we have to remember, right? It's not just providing a service, you're using taxpayers' dollars to provide a service. So you want to be as efficient as possible, because the more taxpayer dollars that is left over, that could go to some other provision or service that is necessary. For example, health. Healthcare requires a lot of money. Sometimes we wouldn't really see this unless you have somebody that requires healthcare, or you yourself end up in the healthcare system, right? The cost of healthcare is very expensive. So, if there's a public sector organization that is, they're doing stuff, but they're not doing it profitably, or they're doing it and there's a lot of wastage, right? It's to the detriment of the taxpayers, because the taxpayers rely on some of these services, education, healthcare, roads, right? These are things that we rely on the public sector for, right? So the main aim is to provide a service, but to provide it as efficiently as possible at the lowest possible cost. The main difference between the public sector and the private sector, what's the difference there? What is the private sector most interested in that the public sector isn't?
To making a profit.
That's it. That's the main difference. The public sector is not, its main concern is not to make a profit. If it is a type of organization where it can make a profit, so for example, like TNTech, right? TNTech is a bit different from Ministry of Health. Ministry of Health is totally provision of service, right? The public hospitals and the healthcare system, they do collect money from you when you go in there in order to do whatever. You get sick and you go into the health center. That is at no cost to you. They even provide you with medication so long as they have it there in the dispensary, free of charge, right? A lot of people may not know this because they think the healthcare system is one that patients really, people don't like to wait, but I've had a lot of my kids, they were born in public hospitals. I still, even up to now, take them to the health center if they get ill or something. Only if it is, we need some kind of specialist attention that isn't offered there, we wouldn't. But they do a really good job there. But TNTech and WASA, on the other hand, they're there and they're what we call statutory corporations. They're there and they're really running like a corporation to make a profit. But their board of directors is not like a board of directors like for the bank. The banks are also private companies too, right? They have a board of directors, or they have somebody that's appointed through an act of parliament, and they need to run at a profit so that taxpayers' dollars isn't wasted. And if they run at a profit, it means that they're not always going to have to lean or turn towards the government for handouts to continue operating. All right, so good job, guys. Good responses with those questions. So now what we want to get into is forms of business organizations. So the ones that we would cover today would be the first three, which is sole traders, sole proprietors, partnerships, limited liability companies. And I believe 4 and 5 we will be looking at in our next session. I do think time might take us all the way to 4 and 5, or at least to be able to complete them in its entirety. So let's kick off with the sole trader or sole proprietor. So these are, I mentioned earlier that the sole trader or the sole proprietor, these are the people that form what we refer to as the cottage industry. It's all the small businesses, people that, individually own their business. They have total ownership and responsibility for managing their business. So we're talking about the little parlor of the road, right? With Miss Betsy running our parlor, and she's doing the little mini stuff, bread, little tin items, things to wash your clothes, snacks, right? Those kind of things. And she lives at home. Her husband probably driving taxi or something. I have a small family, and that's a business. That's what we're talking about there. Or we're talking about the barber. Or we're talking about the doubles man out on the corner. Or we're talking about the guy who pushing the water on the side of the road. Or the Rasta man selling the nuts. They are sole traders. The Rasta man have to go to Agard Nut House, buy his nuts there, right? Agard Nut House is another example of a private business, right? They into the selling of nuts and grains. So they providing a service, and in some businesses they could provide services to other businesses. Like that's a perfect example, right? The man that's selling the nuts, like there's a guy that's be to the top of Frederick Street. I haven't seen him in a while, but still seeing his nuts. Cart is a old Rasta man. He's look like well, you already know who this is, but Boone and Spear, My old man used to have these albums, records, and you used to see picture, and the man used to look just like that man on the album. But I haven't seen him. Somebody else running it now. But anyway, he's been there since I go into secondary school. I always remember we passing, especially like this term where you have a lot of football going on. There's another man that used to come to the intercal games selling nuts, especially in the stadium when you go to watch the games in the stadium. And that man could have throw real good. He used to stay from the bottom of the steps and you just heel him out. A nuts man. And you tell him if you want fresh or salt. And you stay from there and you sometimes 3 packs and one after the other. And you reach up there and what used to happen is you just send your money down and people just take it and keep passing it down till it reach down to him. He's a sole trader. This is one person who has total ownership and responsibility for managing his business, right? He purchases his nuts from Nut House Wholesale, patch it, do whatever you have to do to it and to sell it, right? Now, the thing with sole traders is that the main characteristic that in business studies we always talk about is that sole traders, they are not inseparable from their business, right? So the owner and the business is looked at as one legal entity, right? So they're responsible for all the debts of the business, including things like paying taxes, national insurance. And if the business is sued, it's like you're suing the owner, right? And you'd see as we continue describing the different types of businesses, it's not so for some of these bigger companies. Like Prestige Holdings is Prestige Holdings, which is KFC, Pizza Hut, and a whole line of fast food restaurants. If there's a board of directors, but if you sue Prestige Holdings, you are actually suing Prestige Holdings. You cannot sue the people that is on the board of directors that owns and manages the company. They're separate legal identity from the business itself, right? So sole traders, they don't have that type of separation. When you go register a business as a sole trader, I registered my online teaching business with it's Ministry of Legal Affairs is where you go to register a business. There's a business registrar with Ministry of Legal Affairs. You go, the first thing you do is you do a name search, right, to make sure that there are no other businesses with the name that you're proposing. Once that comes back, you pay like $25, come back in 14 days time, they tell you, well, yeah, the name approved. Then you fill out the business registration documents. So it's the place of operation, what you're going to do, right? And what you get is this certificate of registration, and it will say, like for me, it will be Keston Chandler Trading as We Study Online. We Study Online and Keston Chandler is the same person. If I go and I open a bank account, it'll be Keston Chandler Trading as We Study Online, right? So if somebody happens to sue We Study Online, they're actually suing me, right? There's no separation there. If We Study Online borrows money to buy a monitor, a projector, and a digital whiteboard that I could write on and stuff, and I can't pay the loan, right? If I have personal money in my own account, right? Because usually you'll have a business account set up, bank account, for We Study Online, and you'll have your personal account, Keston Chandler, for your personal funds. If We Study Online takes a loan from the bank gives We Study Online a loan to purchase equipment, and We Study Online cannot fulfill the obligations to pay that loan. And Keston Chandler has money in his account. They could take the money out of there and pay off We Study Online loan, because Keston Chandler and We Study Online is inseparable, right? The word for that is called unlimited liability. I'm right it here. Right? And what it means is the debts of the firm or the business is the responsibility of the sole trader, even can extend to their personal assets, right? Now, the good thing about the sole trader or the sole proprietor is it's very easy to set up. It's not a difficult thing to set up, as I mentioned. You go, you do your name search, you do the registration, and in a matter of 2-3 weeks, your business registered, right? Except in some cases, like if I want to open a lotto booth, or I want to sell alcohol, or sell cigarettes in a parlor or something like that, then you might need a license, right? So this type of business is found very often in the service industry. You know, your nail tech, your hairdresser, your barber, your sometimes even the doubles man, the parlor, right? Service industry. The characteristics of the sole trader or the sole proprietor. Well, they manage the business, but sometimes they may have the help of family and friends, right? So it's a small business, very small, very personal because it's small, and the person that owns the business is usually the same person that is delivering the product. They tend to offer a lot of personal contact with the consumer or with the customers, right? So that's one big benefit sole traders have over, you know, like a bigger business. So for example, you know, you might have an entire private school. Back in my days, used to have a school on Pembroke Street they call Elders or Daniel's Educational Institute. It's like a private school, you know, they're really big. And it started off with the guy Daniels doing lessons, I believe. And well, it grew. So he ended up hiring staff and teachers and thing, you know, and having a lease in an entire building. And it was more or less like a private school. But as the business grows, you tend to lose that personal touch because Mr. Daniel is not the guy that is delivering the classes anymore, right? Here, I am delivering the classes. I am the one that has established the brand or the business. So I know what I want or how I want the business to go, the direction in which I want classes to be, and how I want it to set up. So there's a more personal touch with the client. I do everything from receiving the phone calls, liaising with the parents, doing registration, you know, setting up the classes, setting up notes, doing content, everything. So you have a more personal involvement with the customer, the student, everybody. The thing with the sole trader is that capital is limited. I could only invest up to what I have in savings in the business. Outside of that, you know, I may be able to access a loan or something like that, but you know, there's a cap, there's a limit in terms of how much I could put into the business in terms of capital. So capital sometimes is difficult to raise, it's in small quantities, and because of that, you know, it kind of hinders expansion, right? It also takes up a lot of time, right? Remember, when you are a sole trader, most times for your business to run, it requires your time and effort and energy. Have you ever thought about like the doctor who has his private office? If he goes to Switzerland on vacation and he's the only person that's running the office, then does he earn any money while he's away on vacation? No, he doesn't. You know, when he's not there, then the business technically is not there, right? So there's a huge demand on the time of the sole trader, right? It requires them. And that leads into another point that I'll make in terms of continuity, right? If that person is the sole person that's providing the service and anything happens to that person, then the business itself ceases to exist, right? As a sole trader as well, too, you are also tasked with having to undertake. There's no specialization here. You cannot delegate and say, well, one man go build the content for classes, and somebody else go answer the WhatsApp messages and the phone calls, and somebody else will do the social media posts and they upload to YouTube. As a sole trader, is a one-man show, so you are wearing many different hats and you're performing a large variety of tasks related to your business. All right. So the business is not incorporated. Incorporated is that word that we use to describe a business that has a separate legal identity from that of its owners, right? So like Prestige Holdings is incorporated, and usually you will know an incorporated business because it'll have the word limited at the end of it, right? Something limited company or limited liability company, LLC. So incorporated businesses, they are registered with legal affairs in such a way that the business has its own legal identity, separate and apart from the owner. And what that does is it protects them. It protects the personal assets of the owners. their personal assets cannot be held in lieu of payments for the business, right? If you sue the business, you're suing the business. You cannot touch their personal assets, not especially, because it is incorporated. So the sole proprietor is not incorporated. And because of that, it's very easy to set up. Yeah. So moving on. So I have a short video explainer to look at, right? That's going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the sole proprietorships. Right? So let's take in the video.
In this video, I'm going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of operating a sole proprietorship. So the main advantage is that it's really easy to do. You just start selling a product or providing a service, and provided you're by yourself, it's just one owner, you have a sole proprietorship. Okay? Now, if you want to create a corporation, you have to file articles of incorporation. If you want to create an LLC, you have to create articles of organization. You have to file some paperwork with the Secretary of State for your state. Okay? You have to pay a filing fee. You might, in some cases, for example, if you're going to do a single member LLC, there are some U.S. states where you have to do an annual report and you have to pay annual fees. Okay, when you're doing a sole proprietorship, there are no fees. You're not creating any kind of a legal entity because you and the business are one and the same. Okay, the disadvantage of that is you're going to have unlimited legal liability. Okay, so if the business does something to harm someone, that person who is suing the business can come after you for your personal assets. Okay, if you were, on the other hand, to set up a single member LLC, that person, you'd have limited liability. The person can only come after the LLC's assets, right? They couldn't come after you personally. So
LLC is limited liability company.
So it's easy to set up, but you don't get any kind of liability protection. Now, as a sole proprietor, you're just going to have one layer of taxation. This is what's called a flow-through entity. And this is actually similar to, like, for example, if you set up an S corporation, you know, something. So basically, it's different from a C corporation. A C corporation, remember, is subject to double taxation. The corporation is taxed on its profits, and then if it gives a dividend to the shareholders, then the shareholders are taxed on the dividend. But with a sole proprietorship, you just have one layer of taxation. However, you are going to be subject to self-employment tax, which at the time of this video was 15.3%. So that is beyond, okay, so that's over and above and beyond your federal income tax and so forth. So you got this self-employment.
No, this is kind of, the author of the video is American. So self-employment tax is not something that we have here in Trinidad, but the sole proprietor, if they make in excess, I believe last time it was either $150,000 or $250,000 per annum. You know, you pay taxes in amounts above that. I could always double check that and confirm that for you, right? But there's no self-employment tax because our tax system is a bit different, right? So in that sense, that's not so much applicable here in the Caribbean. Yeah.
Tax. In this video, I'm going to discuss the advantages of an S corporation, whole proprietorship. You just have one layer of percent. So that is beyond. Okay, so that's over and above and beyond your federal income tax and so forth. So you got this self-employment tax that you're going to have to pay. Now, you do get a deduction for half of that. Now, I'll make another video where I go over that in more detail. Now, the nice thing also about having one layer of tax is that the business's losses are going to be deductible to you personally. Okay, remember, you're filing your 1040, okay, your personal income tax return, and then you're gonna have the Schedule C that has the profit or loss of the business. So let's say the business lost $80,000. Okay, so if the business lost that, you can use that as a deduction to potentially offset some of your other income. Maybe you have a day job, okay, aside from.
Right. So again, that's more applicable to America, right? And locally, we don't pay taxes on losses. You wouldn't pay a tax on losses. So here are some of the advantages to sole traders in the Caribbean. One, it's ease of formation, right? Like I mentioned earlier, there's no major legal requirements. You just need to make sure that the name is not in use by another business or somebody else has not registered a business using that name. Other than that, the fees that you pay are very negligible, like $25 to do a name search. Business registration, I believe, was like $100 or $200, right? The independence, remember, we mentioned that in terms of forming your own business. Many people find that kind of satisfying that, you know, this is your business. You kind of determine the rules of engagement and how the business is going to operate, right? Simple organizational structure. You don't have levels of different departments and this person and that person and somebody to handle this and somebody else to handle that. You more or less are the one that's in control. And sometimes you might have 1 or 2 employees who might be friends or relatives. So communication is easy. Decision making is fast, right? Personal services, I highlighted that, right? The owner is going to know the staff because it's probably just a few, and the customers very well. You know, usually I'd know all my students by names. I would know, you know, different things about them, you know, what they like, what they don't like. I could tell when it used to be in person, you could tell, you know, if they're not feeling well today, right? Where I used to operate with some friends before was on Ramsey Street and in Sugarness, and there's a rituals downstairs. So, you know, after a while you know who's by what before they come to class, right? And then they will get to know me as well. You know, back then I used to drink a lot of coffee, so you know they might pick up a coffee for me, right? I would know what they like in terms of what they usually would eat and things like that. So it's very personal, you know, like I've been buying doubles at UV doubles since I was like a teenager. And you know, the guy there, but all of them there's the entire family. I know them really well. Now they know my family. So when I go there, you know, I don't even need to tell them what I want. They know the type of doubles I would eat, although I don't eat doubles anymore. But if I go there now, it's just be like a cup of channel. But back when I used to eat doubles, they'll know what I want in terms of what sauces and stuff. They'll know what my wife want, they'll know what my kids want. Right? That's a personal service. Right? You can't get away from that with a sole trader. You know, if I go in KFC, nobody know what I want unless I go to KFC real often, right? I go there, I go and I tell them, well, I want an original for the baby, a spicy, my wife don't like Thai. I'm gonna tell them all those things. You do have that personal contact, right? Personal control with the sole trader, you are in charge. So I can decide how I want to do my classes, right? If I was working for a school, they might have some rules and regulations, and you know, somebody who would say, well, this is how we want it to done, and this is our standard. You do have that type of autonomy when you're working in a larger organization. Sole traders do. And because of that, decision making is fast, really fast. Right? Secrecy. There's no need for us to disclose our business affairs as part of you know, declaring our income and stuff to tax authorities and banks, right? And most importantly, because this is yours, you have that personal commitment to succeed, right? Disadvantages of the sole trader. Well, as I mentioned before, you have limited sources of finance, right? It's just really your savings, what you could save, how much money you could generate. I could only teach for X amount of hours for the day. There's only so much amount of days in a week. So there's a limited amount of finances, right? There's a lack of specialized staff. There's no one for me to delegate social media stuff to, right? Like for the longest while, I need to go and make some posts on the Facebook page, right? I want to do content to put on TikTok. But in between, you know, organizing for classes, sending out recording, managing the Google Classroom, I'm going to have to correctly work, right? There's no specialization. So, you know, there's a little bit of, what was the word to use? Demand on your time, right? Because you only have time, a certain amount of time for the day, and you have your other personal commitments. There's a huge reliance on your personal health and vigor. You know, when I take my son to cut his hair, especially around when school is reopening, You know, sometimes the barber there on his foot from morning, 8 o'clock, he start working, and sometimes 10 in the night, he's still there. You know, he might have just stopped for once or twice to take to drink something or to eat food lunchtime or something, and then he going like that. And when it's around school time, you can expect that from since early Tuesday, Wednesday before school open, you're going like that, right? And then with that type of business, when you own your own business, as I mentioned before, you don't really have any downtime, because when you're down, then the business is not earning any money, right? The business is not incorporated, you have unlimited liability. So if the business fails and you know there's debts that the business have, loans and stuff, then your personal possession could be used to pay off the debts of the business. And lack of leisure time, you know, few people really understand it. You know, like with my classes, I don't have any evenings. Most evenings I'm doing classes. I try to keep one day free. It start off like that, and then for some reason I usually end up with some class or somebody coming and begging, and you might decide to help out. So, you know, lack of leisure time, right? Same thing with the barber. When it's that peak time, you know, he have to take it as it comes, because he might have a slow period soon after, the week after school open. He ain't gonna have a set of people running to come and get a haircut. So, you know, you'd have a lack of leisure time where that's concerned. Partnerships, that's the other one I said we was going to talk about. So that's a step above or step up from the sole trader. So sometimes if you want to expand the business, right, you might need to share the responsibility of running the business. And in doing so, well, you're going to end up sharing any profits or losses that will be generated. So you may decide to open a partnership or to change the business, the form of the business organization to a partnership. So you might bring in, let's say in my case, I may have a couple of friends that were teachers with me back in the day. And I would say, well, you know, guys, I only teach, well, that's not true. I teach maths, business accounts, chemistry. I don't do English. So I might want an English teacher. I might realize there's a need for Spanish. So I might want somebody to teach Spanish. And I could form a partnership with other teachers, and then we could offer, you know, more subjects, right? They could also pull more resources in, right? More capital. And we could say, well, you know what? We have 4 or 5 or 6 of us now, because that's what I used to do in the past. You know, I had it wasn't even initially, it was one of my teachers, my lecturers from when I was doing my degree. He taught me quantitative methods. And he had a school I was doing, a private place where he was renting a building, like I said, in Ramsden Street. And he was doing lessons, and they needed somebody to teach chemistry because he was the maths teacher, right? And business. Actually, they had a business teacher and accounts teacher. They actually brought me in to do chemistry. That was the first thing I was doing with them. And we used to split the rent. So whatever the cost of rent was, I think we used to pay like 600 each or something, and split amongst all the teachers. You know, and everything would work like that, you know, you split up. So that kind of helped for them to grow the business, because now they were able to do maths, English, the full business suite. Then they were doing the full science, because they had somebody to do the physics and bio. They had somebody doing Spanish and English and literature, right? So we were able to do much more. And that means that if you're doing all those subjects, then a parent just need to send a child to one place and they get everything in one stop, one shop. Yeah. So sometimes businesses do need to move from being a sole trader to a partnership in order to expand, right? And expand in terms of sharing the responsibility of running the business, right? As well as the profits and losses, right? And to help in raising additional capital. So partnerships, just like sole traders, they're not legal entities. They're not incorporated. So they cannot be sued or sued in its own name. Instead, each partner has to be named. So you could still get sued. And if the partnership fails, right, then the personal assets of the partners can be used to settle the debts of the partnership, unless they're what you call a limited partner. But you must have at least one unlimited partner. Limited partner is like they have a kind of get out of jail free card. It means that they the debts of the business is limited to their contributions to the partnership. right? So for a limited partner, their personal assets are safe, right? In an ordinary partnership, your losses are shared equally or as agreed by partners, profits and losses, right? So partners sometimes would sit down and they'll draft a partnership agreement and they will determine the amount of capital that needs to be contributed by each partner, right? The share of profits that they will go with. There's not really a level of continuity because it's a contract. If someone of the partners leaves or dies, then they have to register the partnership all over with the new partners, right? So characteristics of a partnership. Minimum is 2 members, maximum is 20, except in the case of banking when the minimum is 10. Right? You have 2 types of partners. There's limited partners, there's ordinary partners. And as I mentioned, limited partners are safeguarded to the extent of what they contributed to the partnership. So a limited partner contributes $10,000, the partnership go bankrupt, they can't pay the debts, all he's going to lose is his $10,000 that he invested in the partnership. Ordinary partners, they could be asked to pay the debt of the partnership from their personal assets. You must have at least 1 ordinary partner in a limited partnership. Limited partners can't participate in management, right? There's something called a partnership agreement or partnership deed. So things like your profit sharing ratio is declared there. The capitals that the partner is supposed to provide is agreed in there. And any actions to be taken upon the retirement or death of a partner, right? Or even the dissolution of the partnership goes inside of that partnership deed or agreement. Formation of the partnership. When you're forming a partnership, you should have a written agreement, right? And this is called a partnership agreement or a partnership deed. If that is not present, then the partnership is governed by what we call the Partnership Act. And under the Partnership Act, if you haven't drawn up a partnership deed or articles of the partnership, certain things can't happen. So profits and losses are shared equally. There's no interest to be paid on capital, right? And no interest to be charged on drawings. If you do have a partnership deed, inside of there, you will name the partners. You might describe the nature of the business and the date of its commencement, the amount of capital that should be contributed by each partner, how profits and losses are to be distributed, interest on capital. Now, when partners invest money in the partnership, right, they should earn the same amount of interest as they would have if they invested it elsewhere, be it in a bank, a credit union, right, some kind of fund. So the partnership has to pay the partners for putting the capital into the business. We also have to decide on how profits and losses are going to be apportioned. Interest on capital, I mentioned what that was before. You're paying them for investing money in the business. The amount partners are allowed to withdraw, right, in terms of drawings. The interest that you will charge on drawings, right, because to deter partners from taking money out of the business, you will want to set up something called interest on drawings, where they pay, a little bit more. You borrow 100 and let's say you have a 2% interest, and you go and pay $2 more on every 100 that you borrow, right? The role of each partner, salaries, and methods for determining goodwill. Goodwill is this thing that comes into play when the partnership is sold. We'll talk about that when we're looking at partnerships in greater detail. In the absence of a partnership agreement, the partnership is governed by the Partnership Act, and it means that no interest is to be paid on capital, no salaries is to be paid to partners, and profits and losses are shared equally. So you're going to look at a short video with partnerships, video explainer. Right, so you're going to look at this now.
In this video, I'm going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of operating a partnership. So a partnership is really easy to form. You don't need to file any articles of incorporation like you would with a C Corp or an S Corp. You don't need to file articles of organization like you would with an LLC. You just start doing business. The downside is that you have unlimited legal liability. Okay. Now, there are things that can be done to prevent that. For example, instead of just having a regular partnership, you could set up a limited partnership where you have one or more persons who serves as the general partner, and then you have other people come in as limited partners. But the limited partners can't be involved in managing the business and so forth. But the limited partners would only be liable to the extent of their investment, whereas the general partnership could be liable beyond what they've invested in the partnership. And you have some of the large accounting firms have a limited liability partnership where basically the partners are only liable for their own personal actions, not the actions of other partners. Okay, so there's ways to kind of address this unlimited liability issue, but if we just have a regular general partnership, 2, 3 partners, whatever, and it's not limited partners or anything like that, they're going to be subject to unlimited liability. So basically, if the partnership were sued, someone could come after their personal assets, not just the assets of the partnership. Now, a partnership is a flow-through entity, just like S-corp, sole proprietorships and stuff, so you're only going to have one layer of taxation. So that's an advantage just over C corporations. Remember, C corporations are subject to double taxation. Now, a disadvantage of a partnership, you're going to have self-employment tax, and it's going to be assessed on guaranteed payments made to the partners. Guaranteed payments you can kind of think of as like a salary given to the partners, and then also the partner's share of the partnership profits. Okay, will also be subject to FICA and Medicare tax. Now, the partnership, if you form a partnership, you can deduct the losses of the partnership. Okay, they will flow through. Remember, it's a flow-through entity, so the losses will flow through. If it's a $100,000 loss and it's 50-50, you can get $50,000 loss on your personal tax return on 1040 to offset your other income, okay, potentially. Now, it's difficult in some cases to add new investors. Sometimes it can be easy. Let me explain. If you, let's say you have 5 partners and you want to take on a 6th partner, right? You want to go on to this extra person and add them as a partner. All 5 existing partners have to agree. You can't just say, well, we have a majority or whatever. So if there's one person who says, I don't want to add that person as an investor, then it could be hard to bring on new investors. Okay, so everybody has to agree on any new investors. Now, there's no tax basically on property contributions. This is called Section 721. Okay, so if you contribute...
Right, so that's why I'm going to stop the video there, right? Because some of these things is not applicable to our business studies, especially here in the Caribbean.
In this video, I'm going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of...
All right, start over. So, let's talk about the advantages of the partnership and disadvantages of the partnership. That probably might take us to the end of our session. So it means that we'd have to look at our LLCs, limited liability companies, but not next week, because next week is our public holiday. So the following week, right? So the advantages, one of the main advantages of a partnership is that you could raise more capital. Now that you have more partners involved, they could all contribute in terms financially, in terms of raising capital. Another very good advantage is now you have specialization. So let's say I run a restaurant and I have a friend who's an accountant and another person who's into he's like in the service industry or something, hospitality, works at a hotel or something. You know, I bring these 2 people in. You know, the guy that works in the hospitality industry decides to come and work full-time there. So apart from being a partner, he could be a member staff as well and receive a salary, right? The accountant now, they could do all the books for the business. I could now not have to maintain the books and I could focus, let's say my focus or what I'm good at is cooking. I'm the one that, you know, I will do the cooking. I could now focus on cooking because I now have somebody to manage the waiting and attend to the customers outside, because that's the other partner who was in the hospitality service. And then I don't need to do any accounts, right? I have an accountant as a partner who is going to keep those. So partners can specialize and manage different sections, and then that allows you now to take up roles that you are really suited for. It's still simple organization to form. There's not a lot of legal requirements like the limited liability companies. Continuity, well, the business may not be dissolved at the death of a bankruptcy of a partner, but you would have to redo or rewrite the partnership, register the partnership. There is a possibility for limited liability in the case of a limited partnership. The workload is shared. So now, you know, well, the example I give it me being a chef, unless I hire and train other people to cook, you know, if you have other partners, you could leave and go on vacation. There would be two other partners that could oversee what's taking place. And now there's better decision making because, you know, when you work with a team like that and you have more than one person, you see, making decisions on your own, you have your own blind spots, right? You have your own blind spots. You cannot cover all bases on your own. There's some things that you're going to overlook, and that could be as a result of experience and circumstance. And having other people around, you know, they say two heads are better than one. They may pick up on something that you may have overlooked, right? So better decision due to shared knowledge and expertise. Disadvantages. Well, we still have that issue of unlimited liability, right? All ordinary partners are going to be fully liable. It's binding. So if one partner messes up, then all the other partners is going to suffer because of that bad mistake. Capital is still limited. Although you could raise more capital, it's limited to what the partners could bring, and that might not be sufficient for full expansion. It's also difficult to manage when partners disagree, right? Because now you can't just make a decision and continue. You have to get the buy-in and agreement from everybody else. The risk is still concentrated on a few people, and because now you have to get everybody else to agree to decisions, decision making is going to take longer, and that could create room for disagreements among partners. It's still limited to 20 partners, you know, 2 to 20, unless it's banking where there's a minimum of 10. So your capital is limited to what 20 people could provide. In the absence of the agreement, profits and losses are shared equally, regardless of the effort that is expended in the partnership. So those are some disadvantages to think of, right? So just a quick recap before we close off, right? We have like 5 minutes. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to come up with some answers for these questions that I have on the screen. And that will take us to the end of our session for today. All right, so I'm giving you guys a couple of minutes, 5, 6 minutes or so, to come up with some answers for this, and then we will discuss it. Yeah?
Partnership.
Right. And what was the other one? One person, the nutsman, the barber. What is called somebody, and they're the only person that owns and operates the business. You call that
The sole proprietor.
sole proprietor or sole trader.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was.
Right. So give one feature of each. So give me a feature of a partnership and give me a feature of a sole trader.
You have profits in a partnership.
Right. So you have to share profits. Good. That's a feature of a partnership. And losses too. So it's not that you only sharing profits and when you have a loss, well, one man taking all the loss. The profits and losses are to be shared. Right. And what about the sole trader?
They have a lack of leisure time.
No, they don't have a lot of leisure time. They have limited leisure time because they're the one that is involved in running the business, not the sole traders, right? They have limited leisure time. One advantage and one disadvantage of each. One of you do advantage and the other could do a disadvantage. What's the advantage of a partnership, Malachi?
You share profits.
Well, not really the share profits, but you could raise more capital because now you have more people to contribute, you know, if it's money or time or resources towards expanding the business, right? And what about a disadvantage, Kiralee?
A disadvantage would be. So what did he do at advantage from the which
The-
one did he do?
The partnership or the sole trader?
Yeah, which advantage did he do for that one?
He did partnership. How is
Okay.
how is decision making in a partnership? Is it fast or would it be a bit slower now?
Well, it would be a little slower because
It'd
you
be
need the opinions from two different people.
correct, right? So that's like working in a group in school. You know, if you're doing your project on your own, then you just make a decision and you go with it. But then when you're working in a group now, you gotta try and coax everybody. And I think we should do it like that. And then somebody might say, nah, I do it so already, and it's not so. And you know, so you have that, and it could lead to a little bit of disagreement, right? One difference between them. Well, the difference between them that stands out the most for me, I'll do this one, is that of profits, right? As a sole trader, you enjoy all the benefits of your profits. So you have to share that, but in a partnership, you're going to have to share. Another thing is decision making. Decision making is faster when it's a sole trader because you don't need to get the buy-in or get the approval of others, and it's slower in the partnership. All right. So we will stop there for today.